Well, it would seem that Congress and the corporations are joined at the hip. It's a pretty damn strong statement to make, but, when it comes down to money, Congress bends. I'll give you a brief background, what happened with Volkswagen. Volkswagen actually I used to like before they got too over-engineered, like the rest of the German cars. But they used to be really great, and they're very simple. The old VW Bug designed by Ferdinand Porsche for simple, everyday driving, but not a sports car. But what happened was Volkswagen cheated on their emissions test, and the way they did that was through software in the computer management system. So, whereby I'm leading on to something with the class action lawsuits and what Congress is doing, but I got to give you a brief background. What happened first with Volkswagen? If you don't know, Volkswagen cheated on their emissions test, and they got caught. They admitted to it. And the way they cheated was they used the software, the computer management system, that when a car was at idle, it was stationary, the wheels weren't moving, and also the steering wheel was pointed straight ahead, that there would be another parameter of software values that, if I'm phrasing that right, but the software a different set of software values would kick in that would lower the emissions on the engine. And then as soon as the car went into motion, or the wheel was turned and all that, the steering wheel was turned and the car went into motion and the gas pedal was depressed and it wasn't on idle, different software parameters came into play, kicked in, and the engine had better mileage, but the emissions went way down. That's how they cheated. Now, I have to say that, I like the older Volkswagens. I guess they can't pass emissions without all this computer garbage on them and everything, but I still like the older ones better. There probably could be something done, because I know there's other technology out there, not just with HHO, but also the scrubber there was an engineer. He wasn't even a formally trained engineer. That actually came up with something that did bring down emissions. Smokey Yunick, I'll just mention that, but that was one of them. Very famous racer engineer, but not formally trained. But the thing is, the old Volkswagens were great. I used to like those. One problem was a little pricey, even in the United States, but still pretty reliable cars that you can rebuild. Pretty simple, stayed the same year to year, more or less. And I like the concept. Even when they changed a little bit to the Golf and a Rabbit, and they put the diesel in it, still a nice simple car. I like that. Well, times change, corporations change, missions change. It gets top heavy with suits and ass wipes and all this garbage. So anyway, what happened here is that the Congress has proposed a law, the Fairness in Class Action Litigation Act. And what the hell this damn thing is going to do is, well, they call it's going to be like a VW bailout in a way, but the problem is it's not just a VW bailout. I wish they'd just say VW has a bailout. Why don't you just call it that instead of screwing up the whole entire judicial system? Because what this Fairness in Class Action Litigation Act is going to do is going to make it very, very, very difficult for consumers to bring a class action lawsuit against any corporation. Because what's going to happen is that you're going to have to show that every single consumer was affected the same way. And you're also going to have to prove damages, not potential damages. You're actually going to have to prove actual damages. So basically, they also have a lot more design parameters involved, whereby it'll make it too expensive to even bring up a class action lawsuit to a corporation. So Congress and the corporations are in cahoots with each other. And also, I want to say this. When you're talking the word corporations, do not think of a entity that's out there in like an abstract. I know a corporation is an abstract, and it's a legal entity just like a person, right? But I have to tell you this: always think of it as people. It's It's a thing, a scheme that certain people are behind. And, there's always flesh and blood back there someplace when you're always talking about a damn corporation. Because the ones that are making the art of the deal and playing these schemes to keep their pockets full are the evil bastards that are really running the show. And they hide behind these legalities. That's why corporations are mainly, most corporations, like C corporations, the bigger ones, the Fortune 500, are incorporated in the state of Delaware because they have a lot of legal protection in that state. And also, if you're an S corporation, a lot of S corporations are incorporated in the state of Nevada because there's other types of legal protections for S corporations that are better. And, that's just the game that's played. But, when Congress gets out, and they're going to make this broad-based law. I mean, it's bad. If you would think it'd be bad enough, they just said, "Okay, VW, you got. We're not going to penalize you. You're okay." If they just said something like that, I mean, people would bitch at that, right? But to make a broad-based, try to make, they're putting out this broad-based law that says that you have to actually demonstrate that each class member suffered the exact same type and scope of injury as named in the class lawsuit. And, it's going to be different for everybody else, everybody. Look at a case of, like, say, bad stocks or something. Somebody lied on their reporting, on their financials, and you bought these stocks. And there was a class lawsuit against the company that lied on the financials, altered the financials, and there's a class action lawsuit. Well, the parties are going to be injured in different ways because somebody might have had 100 shares and somebody might have had 10,000 shares. And, the injuries are going to be even different for that, even for something that's simple. Now, if you're talking about a product that's defective, well, the thing is, it's like Volkswagen realizes that, well, Congress realizes this, but, I don't give a damn. It's another one. It's another too big to fail scenario. It's like, if they freaking allow the waters to just flood out the way they should, well, too bad, Volkswagen. You lost out. Too bad. The game of risk isn't there for the large corporations because they're in cahoots with the jackasses on the top. And, a lot of people, I should say this in here, maybe this won't be very popular, but, a lot of people don't realize the deal that's happening in Russia. I was actually listening to Bernie Sanders, and, I'm not even a fan of Bernie Sanders, but I realize, as a Democrat, he actually represents more people. He's a better-hearted person that leans to the left than Hillary Clinton by a million miles, right? But, he talked about how the oligarchs in Russia are screwing over the middle class, and, Putin basically represents the oligarchs, and how the IMF has actually been a total failure. And, you know what it is? All these jackasses that are in suits, including the professionals that are walking around in business, that are part of the Karl Marx matrix, which includes our taxation system and our legal system, and our, because really our government was formed originally to protect us the people, but us the people got to be smart enough to use the tools at our disposal. And one of the damn problems we got is we got the entitlement crowd out there that looks for, well, what could the government do for me? I'm going to elect the person that's going to help me out. That's really what they do. Everybody makes their own way. That's the way I look at it. That's the way it really should be. And we give the power to the government. But first, you got to make your own way before you give any power to a governing body. And the only thing is, that's government is just supposed to make things fair and equitable and have laws that protect us the people, against, wrongdoing. In the case of corporations, they can get away with any damn thing now if this law passes, because there'll be no recourse whereby the consumer could bring up a class action lawsuit. Because, in reality, an individual consumer can't bring up a lawsuit against a corporation. That's why you have class action lawsuits, because you got to get together like thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people, and then together as a force, they could take on a corporation. Even that is not that easy. But now they're trying to make it look like, hey, we got to show that everybody has the exact same type and scope of injury, and that's going to be impossible to show. They're going to actually show that they're also going to have to make it that there is a proven injury, not that there's a potential injury. In other words, say, for instance, somebody sold you parachutes that had defective material in it. And, it's like you're going to have to prove, after you freaking hit the ground and go splat, that, hey, I had an injury. But, you can't bring up a class action lawsuit against somebody who had sold defective parachutes in itself because you didn't have an injury yet. You just have a potential injury. So this law is actually trying to eliminate all potential injury, class action lawsuits. That's ludicrous. When you think about it. I had to give that parachute example, even though it has nothing to do with this VW, because just to bring up the point about the potential injury. The potential injury could be pretty damn severe, couldn't it? So, corporations are always freaking playing games. They're smiling in your face. Behind your back, they're hoping you don't see what the hell they're really about. That's why you got, even when you got corporations, you got the 501(c)(3). That's another game. Now, I should add it on here, but that's another game that goes on. Corporations, a lot of people suspect corporations, but they don't expect, when I'm saying 501(c), I'm talking about charitable organizations, do-gooders that are looking like on the outside like they're doing good. That's another game that goes on, too. They always got a scam, and they hope you don't see it. And, I'm here to fight for the people. That's what this is going on with this channel. I'm not here to freaking dramatize or scare people, but, this thing, man, I'd really like to know, I don't have a list of it, but I'd really like to know is exactly who's pushing this law, but it really does emphasize how Congress, when the next financial crisis happens, this is not Congress, but, judicial system I'm showing here, but, the next financial crisis happens, what's going to happen. They're going to bail out the too bigs to fail again and screw over everybody else, which is, the modus operandi of everything that goes on. And I got to tell you this, I wish people didn't even buy new cars in 2015. They had a record sales of new cars partly because the gas prices went down. I don't think they're going to stay down that long. I know they've been staying down a little longer than I thought. Went down a little more than I thought. I wish the consumers didn't even waste their money on that stuff and just, kept with the old wheels if they could. And it's like when you're buying big ticket items like this, you're making payments, you're helping all the suits. You're beholden to, most people when they bought a new Volkswagen didn't buy it cash. They have it payments for 5 years, 6 years, 4 years, whatever it is. And when I'm looking at it, it stimulates the economy. Yeah, whose economy? Whose economy? I have to say this, that, if they want to really screw the middle class, well, the middle class needs to what would be a smarter thing to do is the middle class tighten their belt before they have to tighten their belt. In other words, why buy big ticket items when because you can afford it? I would look at it like this. I would get by with the older stuff and do not buy any of these big ticket items that help the big corporations. Period. Because when it comes down to it, you buy something, and most of this, I can tell you, even when it's, unrelated to this Volkswagen thing or anything out there, no matter what big ticket item it is, they're finding ways to make them obsolete. They're finding ways to make them too expensive to repair. Like this old Volkswagen here, this VW bus. If it doesn't rust out, you could freaking use it for 100 years or more. Just keep rebuilding it, replacing parts as needed. Try to do that with something brand new. Try to do that with anything that's on the market today, whether it's even a refrigerator or something simple like that, because everything's designed to fail today. Give an example of a refrigerator from the 1930s. A lot of people just threw those out because they didn't like the way they looked anymore, or it didn't have exactly the same capacity. But a lot of that stuff, it was overbuilt, and it's still working today. So, I look at it like this way: don't feed the corporation. You have money to spend, feed the entrepreneur. Feed the guy that actually is out there making something and is a small business owner, or even a cottage industry type owner, mom and pop shop or whatever. Because these corporations, what they always do is they collude to get together with Congress, and Congress they're just, it's a racket, man. And I'm like, screw this bullshit, because this really aggravated the hell out of me. And to me, it's a warning shot or prelude to what's going to happen when the TPP gets passed by, something Obama's trying to push, and Hillary Clinton. And, despite the rhetoric by Trump, I can smell something up here with a split vote. But anyway, just going too long on this. I just want to warn people about this deal, because it's like if they make it class action lawsuits too difficult to bring up, they're not easy to bring up in the first place, because you got to get a lot of people together. The attorneys that are acting on behalf of the people for class action lawsuits aren't doing it out of their goodwill. They're only doing it for money. There's got to be enough money in it for them. Now, if this law gets through, you're going to have to demonstrate that everybody in the class action lawsuit got harmed the same way, and you also got to show exactly how you got harmed, not a potential harm. In other words, it's going to pretty much eliminate all class action lawsuits. It's going to be ridiculously expensive to get through, just because Congress wants to protect Volkswagen. Now, is Volkswagen a freaking American company? No. Should bring that point up. It's not an American company. They didn't seem like they want to protect General Motors. Hey, the hell with them, right? So I'm kind of pissed off at this, as you can tell. So I'll just cut it off right here. Just wanted to give you the basic information of what's going on. And, this is really, to just sum it up in summary, this law that they're proposing to limit class action lawsuit, they call it the Fairness in Class Action Litigation Act. In other words, fairness being that corporations can't stand any freaking class action litigation. This tells you exactly what's going to happen when TPP comes into play, because the Trans-Pacific Partnership is not even going to be affected by what Congress does. It's going to be oversight by corporations and their attorneys. You, the consumer, are going to get screwed. So I'm warning you again. Do not buy shit from the freaking corporations if you can. Try to buy it from people that are individuals. And I also want to tell you this. Support your independent media, because I can tell you right now that independent media, there's not that many of us around. And I can tell you the bigger guys that are independent media, I think they're opposition-led from the top. So let me just put it to you that way, and let's keep fighting this bullshit, because and I will keep warning you of what's coming abreast on various issues, and the garbage that's out there that's not true. I'll tell you about that too.